students, today we're going to be learning about characters and characterization. And as we learn about characters and characterization, we're going to be taking Cornell notes. You could either take digital Cornell notes or handwritten Cornell notes according to your learning style. To make digital Cornell notes, you're going to go ahead and use the Cornell Notes template. Make sure that you include your topic in the upper left-hand corner, the date, and the essential question. Today's essential question is, how do authors reveal what the characters in a story are like? In order to begin, we want to first define certain terms. We should define what a character is. A character is an individual in a story. This could be Harry Potter, Vashti from the Dot, or if we're thinking about the movie Tangled, Rapunzel. Characters are responsible for making the plot events of a story happen. So they can initiate or start the event. In the movie Tangled, Rapunzel initiates the plot, or she starts events happening by leaving her tower. They can react to events. So in the movie Tangled, Rapunzel reacts to various challenges that she encounters on her way to meet her parents. Or the plot can develop through interactions between characters that move the plot forward. So Rapunzel's interactions with Flynn Rider help to move the plot forward as well. There are three terms for different types of characters that I want to familiarize you with. The first is main character. The main character is the character a story mostly focuses on. Then we have protagonist. The protagonist is the character who's working to solve the conflict or the problem of the story. And most of the time, the main character and the protagonist are the same, but there are some exceptions. Examples of this would be in Harry Potter. He's the hero or the good guy of the story. Mario, 11, if we're talking about Stranger Things, or the protagonist of Tangled would be Rapunzel. These are the heroes of the story. And a good way to remember that as a pro tip is we kind of look up to professional athletes as our heroes. So pro and hero, right? Protagonist is the hero of the story. AN, the prefix AN means against. So the antagonist is the character who goes against the protagonist or the villain of the story. So if we have Harry Potter as the hero or the protagonist, Voldemort would be his opposite, right? Or the villain to that. For Mario, we have Bowser. And for Rapunzel, we have Mother Gothel. Characterization is the process by which a writer reveals the personality of a character. There are two different types of characterization, direct and indirect. Direct characterization is when the author tells the audience what the personality of the character is directly, either by speech or thoughts. So we hear directly what the character is like. Indirect characterization is more common and more interesting, where the author shows things that reveal the personality of the character. Examples of direct characterization. So how do we get to know a character? We can get to know a character based on what the character says or the character's thoughts. These are direct examples of characterization. We can also learn about a character through indirect characterization. Examples of indirect characterization include the character's effect on others, the character's actions, or the character's looks. We, as readers, have to make inferences or educated guesses based on the text and our own life experiences to determine what kind of person a character is. We use the acronym STEAL to analyze characters. So STEAL stands for speech, thoughts, effect on others, actions, and looks. And it is an acronym for analyzing characterization in the same way that ideas, which is inference, definition, example, antonym, and synonym, ideas is an acronym that helps us study context clues. So we're going to go more in depth now into what STILL stands for and how we analyze each of those aspects of characterization. The S in STILL stands for speech. What does the character say? How do they say it? For example, using the dot, Vashti says, if I can make little dots, I can make big dots too. So that speech, we can infer from that piece of speech that Vashti is ready to try new things. In addition to speech, another example of direct characterization is thoughts, or what the characters think. So we'll be using the dot to cover most of these examples. So in the dot, Vashti says, well, maybe I can't draw, but I can sign my name. So from this thought, we can infer that Vashti is aware of her current abilities, but doesn't yet realize that she can do more than she thinks. To review, so far from the STILL acronym for analyzing characterization, the S stands for speech, or what the character says. The T stands for thoughts, or what the characters think. And the E has to do with effect on others. So how do other characters treat that character? How do they react to that character? What do other characters say about that character? Or how does the author reveal the way in which other characters think of them? Okay, so all of that has to do with indirect characterization. An example using the dot with regards to effect on others is when the boy at the end of the story says to Vashti, you're a really great artist. I wish I could draw. So we could tell that that boy is affected by Vashti's art, and the inference there is that Vashti is inspiring others. Okay, so we're analyzing characters using the acronym STILL, which stands for speech, thoughts, effect on others, and the A stands for actions. And actions has to do with what the character does. An example of this is when the author states Vashti kept experimenting. The inference we can make from that action is that Vashti is excited to learn about art now. So the last letter in STILL has to do with looks. It's the final element of characterization, and basically has to do with what the character looks like. So in the same way that we make judgments about people based on their appearance, we can also make judgments regarding characters based on the way they appear. When we're thinking about romantic literature like comic books or early Walt Disney movies, the character Scar, for example, he has a scar on his face which can show that he's been in fights, but it can also be symbolic of something ugly inside of him, right? And we have a lot of villains who appear visually ugly or deformed that has to do with certain character traits happening within them. Okay, like Two-Face or Joker, right? The way they look has to do a lot with the characterization within them. Okay, so sometimes with modern literature, it's not as important, but with regards to comic books or early Disney movies, it would be. Okay, then we have modern Disney movies like Frozen, where they turn that idea on its head, because the prince is actually a villain even though he looks charming. Or with Shrek. You know, Shrek looks visually unappealing, right? But it's meant to send the bigger message that looks can be deceiving. Okay, So now that we know this, you are going to go ahead and write a 2 to 3 sentence summary of what you just read. Your summary needs to answer the essential question. Okay, so what is the essential question? The essential question is, how do authors reveal what the characters in a story are like? You also need to fill in the Q column with important terms or with questions that you would ask if you were the teacher. So I might add the term character, and I might also ask a question. Right next to protagonist, I might say, who is the protagonist of Hatchet? Okay, for those 6th graders. If you're a 7th grader, you might be asking, who's the protagonist? Sorry, I shouldn't be underlining that. Who is the protagonist in the lottery? Okay, so go ahead and make sure that you fill in the Q column with key terms and questions, and that you also include a 2 to 3 sentence summary that answers the EQ.